All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the June edition of Dinner with the Devs. It's Until You Fall update. So before I go through our housekeeping, we'll do some introductions. So we'll start over here and we'll work our way around.
Hi, I'm Patrick Jalbert. I'm the design director for the project.
Hi, I'm Joey Zolkowski. I'm a game design intern.
I'm Dave Bennett. I am the project director.
Dwayne here, marketing team for Schell Games.
Hey everyone, I'm Kwame Babb. I'm the VFX artist.
Hey, I'm Chase Hardy. I'm a game designer.
Awesome. And on the live chat over there, we have our marketing coordinator, Allie, and our senior marketing director, Jill, helping out with the live chat and the live tweets. So what we got going on, please, we want you to ask as many questions as you can about the game, its development, the closed alpha. We're taking questions on Twitter, we're taking questions on the live chat, and we're also moderating and looking at the questions on Discord. So feel free to ask questions about it, and we might as well just jump right into it. So we have some questions already from some of our folks on Twitter. Alexander asks, about how Until You Fall is being developed for virtual reality. And so before we go into specifically how the game is being developed for VR, how about Dave, if you want to give a quick explanation about what Until You Fall is?
Sure. So Until You Fall is a kind of hack and slash roguelite VR game where you are a badass magical knight that has two weapons. You go into this forest and you need to hunt down this horrible creature and fight those things looming behind me. And you need to basically just become a literal sword god. You are not starting off as a bumbling squire. You are awesome, and you become even more awesome to defeat these neon horrors. And so yeah, it's really about the sense of immersion, being able to just feel like you are really in there wailing on enemies with swords.
Very cool, very cool. So while everybody is working on the development of the game, what have you done differently with this game relative to your other virtual reality projects? And maybe Patrick, if you want to start with that, and you guys can jump on in.
Well, there's 100% more swords to start with.
This is the game that has the most swords that I've worked on.
I would say the other biggest difference is that we started actually with the sort of building off of a combat prototype. Like we do a lot of puzzle games at Schell. I Expect You to Die is an emphasis on puzzle solving, and this is the first time we've set out to create a VR game that has replayability as its top goal.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time up front on just getting the inner combat loop working.
Yeah, no, like we want it to be an experience that people want to come back to time and time again and keep playing. Like we wanted enough to make sure that there's enough meat on these bones that people feel like it's like, oh man, I want to actually get back in there and see something new, or try something out, or try this new weapon. Another big thing that was kind of new compared to other VR projects is we actually really tried to tackle the problem of movement in VR, because it was kind of a starting off with VR, it was kind of like a no to be like, nope, we're staying still, we don't want to get anyone sick, this is too much, let's just start with the basics.
Yeah.
A lot of some of what's great about I Expect You to Die came out of that constraint of like, yes, we need to keep you in place, so we have the telekinesis, we're solving puzzles. How do we make interesting levels with that constraint not being able to move? For Until You Fall, we're like, okay, we could try to continue with that constraint, but in a combat game, it would be really nice to be able to move around the environment. Yeah. How do we do that without making you sick? And so a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into the iteration and prototyping of like, yeah, okay, in addition to being able to hit dudes with swords, you need to be able to move through an environment without feeling like you're going to fall over. Ironically. So yeah, no, I think that was, compared to a lot of the other VR projects that I know I've worked on personally in the past, like the movement itself was a big thing.
Very cool. So with Kwame, with you being the VFX artist here, how are you approaching the animations, in working with that movement within the game?
Working with the movement? I mean, I'd say for me, so one of the big things is always feedback.
Yeah.
And this game, because we're trying to, this is a very expressive game. We're
Okay.
trying to make you really feel like, again, like what, emphasizing what Dave said about you being a sword god, you
Yeah.
feeling important. We're trying to make you feel powerful in every time you do anything. Anytime you swing the sword, anytime you make contact, anytime you do damage, we're trying to make that feel really important and feel very powerful. But we're also doing it in a very creative and kind of cool aesthetic way.
Okay.
So in this project in particular, I think was interesting to try to develop something that worked in VR, but that still fit within something that was between an arcadey visual juiciness and something that you can still perceive as like a person actually doing it, right? Like, because there's always when people have an idea of what happens when you swing a sword or when you move forward or anything like that, and there's an aspect of that understanding of realism that has to happen, and then you have to kind of amp it up and bring it into game space. In non-VR games and PC games or console games, it's a lot easier to do that because you're separated from the character. Even in first person, you're still sitting
Right.
away from your TV. In this, you're in it. So like the things that happen have to be there for you to perceive, but also not block you and still represent the thing you're doing. So that was a pretty big challenge. That we did a pretty good job at getting a kind of a first pass in there. We think it feels pretty good. There's always more to do. And this is so new that there's constantly going to be more ways to improve it.
Very cool. Very cool. And speaking to your point about the difference of doing it in VR versus a PC, I saw there was a question. Oh, here it is, from Danielle on Twitter. For those who have worked on both regular games and VR games, what are some unexpected differences that you have to think about during the development phase? So, great question. So,
I'm trying to
I
think
think a
where
little
we
bit of everybody can.
Everything?
Yeah. If you can tell by the 1,000-yard stare. We all just had
Great
simultaneously.
question. There's so much.
Yeah, no, like literally everything you think you know about game development when you're working in VR is generally wrong. It's a lot of stumbling through. It's like, oh, I think this will work. Oh, that did not work, either because now I'm sick or I literally can't see what's going on.
Right.
I mean, I know that I think for both of you, this is kind of your first time in VR. I don't know, like, what are the kind of the biggest surprises for both of you?
For me, I mean, like coming into this project late, it was really surprising to get in there and, like Kwame was saying, just feel powerful. Like, it's really cool how, when you're looking at a project like this from the outset, you see swords playing around on screen and you're like, well, that's easy, it's just playing a controller. But there's so much design work that goes into making that feel right, making it feel like you're actually swinging a sword around. And those are challenges that I don't think you run into on typical PC games or anything, because then it's just basic animation. It doesn't really matter how it feels, just as long as it looks like it's swinging a sword. But in VR, it has to feel right, And that was really impressive, like coming into the project and getting to see that.
Yeah, and for me, like, I've done a lot of level design in the past, and I would make something, block something out, and I think that scale was great. Put the headset on, start walking around, and that object is way too close, or way too far away, or way too big, or way too small. And it really is, you can't just make the scene and set it up and assume it's gonna be right. Like, the tricks that I used to use, or you can place things in certain ways to where a certain camera angle, it lines up just right, but in VR, that's all exposed, and it's a one-to-one scale, and you have to be very precise with how you're setting everything up. And so pulling that off and making the space feel right is a lot more iteration and sort of touch and go, I think.
Very cool. So whenever you guys are talking about iteration and feedback, for those who are watching this and might not know, we are running a closed alpha for the game through Discord. And I don't know if we can get the link of the closed alpha application. Awesome. So it's in the live chat. If you fill out it might be in the live chat very soon. But you can also find it in our Discord. So it's discord.gg/untilyouFall. and you'll be able to find the application there. But what type of feedback or iteration that you, from the closed alpha, that you thought were maybe that you didn't think about before, or how players are approaching the fighting in a way you guys didn't expect?
Sure.
I think that we've been seeing, well, we've been getting a lot of really good feedback, especially on weapon balance right now, just as our current state in the closed alpha. So we're taking a look at our like the balance of the specific weapons and how the weapons combo together. So we're getting a lot of good data from how much people are using different kinds of weapons, what weapons are popular together, and why that might be, what kinds of traits or rewards that you can find in the dungeon that are getting used, and which one of those really correlate to a high win rate. I think we've got a couple standouts. One right now definitely ended up being much stronger than we expected. So it's sort of I won't say which one, but it's a one-way ticket to winning the game right now. And those are the kinds of things that we're trying to hammer out the rough edges of.
Yeah, I know we've gotten some good feedback too about like parts of the tutorial that are confusing, or just like, oh man, I wish I could pause the game and take a break. That feature does exist, but we don't explain it well. So it's like, it's stuff like that where it's like, oh, it's so obvious. Of course it's going to get, and then you're very humbled by the fact that it's like, no, actually we didn't explain it well. So let's iterate on it and improve the tutorialization.
Oh yeah, I think that was one of the biggest surprises, was realizing we know that this is a physically active game, and a lot of people's play sessions are based off of when they get tired. And we were surprised to hear that most people that were in the alpha originally felt that they would lose their run if they stopped. And so the game was sort of pushing them to maybe go a little bit farther than they'd like to.
So they're like on the ground.
Yeah.
I just want to beat this one guy. I just need to do it.
We were being a little too literal that until you fall.
Yeah.
And my first week here, I think you basically told me just play the game, get oriented with it. I didn't know that there was a save option, so I was doing the same thing, and my arms were sore. I'm
so tired.
I really wanted to beat it. But,
Keep playing.
Yeah, Dave really, well,
Yeah.
I'm not on the channel. I was going to say he might not be a taskmaster, but maybe he is. I don't know. I mean, Joey's testimony's here.
We worked very hard.
Cool. So, I guess let's go a little bit deeper into that. Why is a tutorial for something that is, well, tutorials in general, but for a VR sword fighting game, why is the tutorial so important?
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? I mean, we're doing a lot of weird things in this game, for one. The fact that, a small pillar of this game from the get-go when we're kind of developing, we're actually talking about this when we're eating food, is the fact that, we want you to feel awesome, so dropping swords in this game does not make you feel awesome. So you don't pick up swords, you literally manifest swords out of energy from your hands, and you just out of nowhere. So we gotta tell you how to do that. We gotta tell you how to move. We need to tell you kind of the basic mechanics of yep, it's not a game where you just kind of wiggle your sword at the guy and they kind of fall over. No, there is a kind of a tempo of attacking and blocking, and so you need to learn those mechanics and kind of get those basics down to actually enjoy and engage with the game. And then when we get to the kind of deeper systems like the mid and outer loop, it's like, oh, there are swords you can buy, there are swords you can upgrade. How do I do those things? And in order for this game to be fun and repeatable, you need to actually be able to engage with those systems. And so if we don't tell you how to do that stuff, half of the game just is not understandable.
Yeah, and again, for a normal game, I don't think that a lot of that would be a surprise or crazy, but for us, really getting across a tutorial in VR when you have a body, when you're holding weapons, when something is running at you, was a huge challenge that I think we knew was going to be a challenge going into it, and we still underestimated how tough it is to get somebody to pay attention to something when they're under attack.
Yeah, no, I think when you were under duress, it is very hard to take instruction. As it turns out, when this guy is about to hit you with a sword, if someone's shouting at you to hold the B button, it's like, wait, what?
I can see how that could be tough.
Yeah, and prompting people, I think, in a console game is so much different than doing it in VR, right? In VR, you have so much agency that that people just assume, right? They just say, oh, I have hands, cool, I'm gonna pick something up. or I have a controller, I might try to move, right? And they may or may not try to do that stuff. And then once all this stuff pops up, there is no B button. Like, we're not like flashing B, 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 you know, we're not doing those things that like a lot of other games do, because the perspective is so much different. And like you said, when you're under duress, you know, your vision changes, you know, like you just can't see
Where
that
are you
stuff.
looking?
Yeah. Right, yeah, where are you looking?
We
I
don't take
can't
control of your camera, right?
I can't
I can
control
look
where
over
you
there
look.
at the rock, and meanwhile
Yeah.
there's an enemy to my left.
Yeah.
You just never know.
Right, so
Yeah.
all of that stuff changes.
A lot of the early iteration we had to do for the tutorials, like figuring out how to pace out the information, because it's like, okay, if you've never really played a VR game before, or even if you have and you just like, this is a cool looking game, so you're like, just kind of looking around, taking it all in, like, yeah, okay, you're missing the big block of text right there that's telling you to hold down the trigger.
Yeah.
So we need to just give you your time and space to be able to actually kind of absorb the stuff. And so it really is just about like, all right, when can we teach you about this? How much can we teach you in this moment? How, like, can we delay this till later in the game? That kind of thing. So those are the kind of questions we're like, yeah, let's try it all up front. Oh, no. And then to kind of stagger it out.
And for Until You Fall specifically, you know, I feel like we're at the point for the virtual reality market where a lot of games are kind of doing the same thing. Like there's the standard teleportation and that sort of stuff, but I feel like a lot of things in Until You Fall that are kind of brand new for VR. So we're not only teaching like VR newbies how to use VR, but we're teaching like existing VR players how to use these new mechanics that you guys have developed.
The movement especially, like both with just being able to walk, but also the kind of teleport dash. Like those are two things, like even the turning actually, like quick turning and targeting is like, it's really nice, and I love that we have it, but it's a thing that's like, oh right, people don't know about this, so we need to tell you.
It's not very familiar, like for like me, I played a lot of VR, I feel like, and this feels like something totally new that I haven't seen in other games.
Very cool. Very cool. So, let's see. Serp from YouTube. Serp is asking.
Just felt right.
Serp is asking, what content will the game have? Only combat or something more?
So the game is focused on combat. Everything in the game is driving you towards the combat. We would love to expand it in other ways, but we really just wanted to make sure that the combat feels as awesome as possible. Because again, the player fantasy we want to achieve is that you were a badass warrior, and so the music, the visuals, the feel of the weapons, the fact that you get money to buy and upgrade other cool weapons, like it's all built to just kind of like get you into a flow state and wreck fools.
There you
So
go.
that is definitely the core focus.
Yeah, and I think I guess following up on that, we are trying to make sure that we're focused on combat and that there is a progression loop, so we aren't just a battle arena. We are putting you through a dungeon. We do have rewards that you're earning within the dungeon, and since we're a roguelike, those go away if you die. And we have a pretty big selection at this point of traits that you can find randomly that'll give you special power-ups for the run. And we're trying to make sure that different runs, even if you've got the same weapons, feel unique and interesting depending on which traits you get and how you upgrade your weapons.
Yeah.
So we are trying to get you through a story there. You are hunting down a particular creature in the game, and we want you to feel like once you've beaten it, that was a good self-contained experience.
Yeah, and if you want to play more, you can.
Yeah.
Get more weapons.
Get more swords.
Got a little low.
I think
Got hit stuff.
I think you touched on it a little bit earlier when you were talking about like the pre-production process for the game, but it's, you know, with I Expect You to Die, Schell Games' other game, when you complete a level, you're kind of done. Like you know the solution to the puzzle and everything, which is still really fun, but and Until You Fall, you get the experience of getting to complete it and then go back again, and you might have a totally different experience the second time.
Yeah, it's about the rewards you get, it's about the enemies that show up at certain times, like, so much of the effort of Chase building all the different levels that he did, like, is to give you different interesting combat arenas to fight in. And so, with those being randomized, with the enemies that show up being slightly randomized, rewards being randomized, like, we want to make sure that each run feels different enough that you want to, see what happens next. Or, oh, cool, I got this really cool combo that happened to work out this one time, maybe I'll get it again.
Yeah.
I could totally win the game if I got that again. I know what to do now.
Yeah, we're getting to the point now where we're finding new builds and interesting combos just internally as we're playing. I think the offhand gauntlet is now internally pretty popular. And we're seeing a lot more like super focused builds and magic focused builds than we were seeing before. And I think that that kind of variety I'm personally really excited about.
Yeah. When we get arguments about people thinking the axe is either too good or just the worst, it's what I live for.
That means it's correct.
Yes. We're doing
Perfect.
something right. Yeah.
Oh, good deal. So, let's see, Alexander from Twitter is asking, what are the biggest engines restrictions or technical difficulties you've met? So, before we dive deep into that, I guess if we can talk about what game engine is, this game is on, and then go into what type of constraints that you've had to have for it. And then, if you run into some type of hurdle, how you guys have solved that.
Well, we're using Unity. It's the engine that the team's most comfortable with, and we're able to build it most quickly in. It's also what we prototyped the combat in as well. The biggest thing about VR is making sure you're at a high enough frame rate to not make you sick. So the target frame rate for VR is 90 frames per second. Which is, it's like, okay, sure. But in VR, you're rendering everything twice. And so you want to make a game look as awesome as this looks, but also not chug and run badly. And so some of the hardest things have been like, all right, riding the line between making something look awesome versus making something run performantly. So that is currently one of the bigger focuses, that we're trying to make sure that everything's running well. But I don't know, any other challenges in VR specifically, at least developing it?
Oh, there's a ton for me.
Yeah.
There's an absolute ton for me. I mean, I could start with just as using particles, right? In a non-VR game, billboarding is everything, right? It's generally how you set things up. Billboarding is harder in VR.
What is billboarding?
Billboarding is basically when you set up you have a quad, or you have a particle that you're playing, like say you're making smoke or something like that. And in a traditional game, that smoke will be rendered just flat, but it will move based on your camera length, your camera angle, so that it always looks the same. It's always facing you, so it always presents itself in the best way. In VR, because you have the camera's on your head, you can move your head however you want, and that particle's going to try to orient itself to however you're moving your head. So the problem is that because you can move your eyes, I don't know if you can see this, but you can move, your eyes like this.
I can see it.
And move your. I know you can see it. You can see the billboarding, right? You can kind of spy on it, and it looks really bad. So like my smoke will be sitting here doing this weird, crazy dance when it's supposed to not be doing that. There's tech built into Unity to combat that, but it's still a hurdle that you have to deal with. Depth is an issue, making effects feel like they're deep or like they're voluminous. That is challenging, and I've done some things to go around that. I've done some effects instead of using just particles. I've actually made some geometric effects. That is another hurdle. And in both of those fields, right, just making sure that there's not too much happening in your face.
Yeah.
At one point, it's probably a much simpler and more challenging problem, but that is a huge problem because you need to be able to see to react to the game. And if I have to put all the effects right here, you need to be able to recognize what's happening. And otherwise, all of that cool effects I make is just going to bother you, and you're just going to hate them. And I don't want you to hate them. I want you to love them. So yeah, those are some challenges.
Cool. Anybody else?
I think just in terms of getting good combat feel in VR, like I know that one of the earliest prototypes that we did, and Kwame, you can speak to this too, I'm sure, was burning a lot of time figuring out how to reinvent the typical things that you would do in a fighting game to make a hit feel good. Like typically you want to have a combination of a hit pause where you're holding some aspect of the character's animation, or potentially even hitching an entire frame to make a punch feel like it's meaty or connected really well. You want to have a very subtle camera shake, sometimes a screen flash, sometimes a post effect. And all of that, if you just put it in VR, guaranteed will make somebody sick or give them a headache.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out the right balance of how to change those things. Like, what's a way that we can do a screen flash in VR that doesn't hurt your head after a few minutes of it? How can we do a camera shake that doesn't make you feel sick?
Right.
How can we give you a hit pause without actually freezing your hand in place,
Right.
and then having to deal with the fact that your real hand's moved?
Yeah.
Hitting enemies and being hit were like some of the hardest things that
Yeah.
we had to like really just focus on.
Yeah.
It's like it seems so basic, but it's like, yeah, well, it is basic, but it's important to get it right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it was all, again, scaling of things and sightlines. You can set up a scene, you think it's perfect, and then you get in, you walk around, and you realize, wow, all 5 of those things line up perfectly, and that's really strange. And then you move around a little more. You think it looks great, but again, you can look anywhere, right? Your camera's not fixed, so it's just so much more space to account for.
Good stuff. So, what is one thing? I'll do this for one of each of you, or each of you. What is one thing that players should look forward to in Until You Fall?
It's a good one.
Patrick, go.
Oh man, I knew I regret being on the end.
Yeah, that's what you get.
I can say the thing that I'm hoping that people will look forward to, get excited about, is the level of depth that we've been able to get into each weapon. I think that that's one place where it actually has ended up working better than I think we thought it would, that we've got a nice mixture of each weapon has its own handling feel, so it actually heaves differently. You can move it into block positions, and it swings a little bit differently, so it has some of its own character just as a VR object that you are fighting with. And then on top of that, we've now got enough of our systems in place that just the combination of how well it can deal damage, what types of innate traits does it have, how much combo length does it have, really changes the play style. And we have a lot more people, both internal and in our alpha, honestly, who get sentimental about weapons. And where we expected to see people sort of shopping around weapons a lot, it seems that, some you get a weapon, really love that weapon, and then want to focus on leveling that weapon up and getting really good with it, and just learning all the nuances to that specific weapon.
Kind of playing off of like the depth of the game is, I think something to really look forward to is the amount of playtime that you can enjoy in this game. You know, there's so many VR experiences where it's like 10 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe an hour, and then you're kind of done. But Until You Fall, it keeps going for a while, certainly longer than the average VR game, I think. There's a lot in there that keeps you coming back and keeps you continuing to play for, hopefully a good value, I guess, once it's released.
I think the thing I'm excited for people to just get in there and see and feel is the vibe of the game. It's this weird neon hellscape with an awesome synthwave / dark wave / sword wave soundtrack.
Hashtag sword wave.
Hashtag sword wave. Copyright Justin DeVore 2019. But no, really, like, so much of everything we've done, again, making you feel awesome, making you feel like a badass, making you feel like a cool warrior. The combat feels great, but again, the music, the look, the vibe of everything is just driving you towards this combat. You are in this murderous dance club fighting neon glowy dudes, and you are just being pushed into combat with the awesome music. And again, the goal early on was like, yeah, okay, let's get you involuntarily just kind of going with it, and I think we've succeeded in that. And it's really funny to see that just everyone who gets in there, like, no matter how old or how experienced they are, they're just like, oh yeah, okay, Let's do this. It's time for violence, I guess.
Okay, guess I gotta fight.
Yeah, so I'm excited for people just to get in there and feel it, because watching it's one thing, but getting in there and feeling it is another.
My turn. For me, it's got to be the. We don't talk about it all the time. It's the magic. On all those weapons, every one of those weapons, they all power up as you fight, as you block, as you swing, and they gain in power. And when they're ready, they light up, and they're bright, and they're emanating, and they're just gleaming, you know. And as you activate, each one's got a special power, and when you activate it, they all look different. They're all I've done a lot of work to try to make sure that they feel like a little bit alive when you activate the magic, or when you've either or when they're ready to go. So they pay attention to those weapons. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. They will not please. No, you'll see them. But pay extra attention, because I think that if you do, you'll start to see some of the connectivity in the way that the weapon works, and what the magic is within the weapon, and how it actually flows. So I'm really excited to see people start to really like get into the nitty gritty of getting. It's kind of what you were saying, like people know their weapon and they love their weapon. I hope that people get into that part. You know, they start to see how it works, you know, how that magic works. So
Yeah, and then riffing off that, the supers, like, they feel different, which is so awesome. Like, there are different strategies to using different ones. And it's been really fun watching different people play and how they interpret how you're supposed to use them. And finding different strategies has always been interesting. My favorite part, I guess, is when someone really gets into the flow and you're just nailing combos and hitting every block correctly, and you feel so awesome. And then you end a room, and maybe you got like one sliver of health left, and you're like, oh, I did it. Oh wait, there's another room. Okay, you like go trudge in, and it starts again. You're back in the flow. And it feels so great.
Nice. So speaking of the fighting and combat into the game, Serp is asking. So this is a part about some of the sword fighting games that we've been seeing, that there's been, you know, you've been able to chop up your enemies, or if there's like a lot of, you know, blood and gore and stuff in certain games. So Serp is asking you all, will there be dismemberment in this game, or are we able to slice up enemies? Is there, you know, blood and gore? So answer that, and then I guess you can go into the rationale as to why you guys made that decision.
So there's no dismemberment, as much as we would want it to. It's cool, but it was kind of like, yeah, we could add that, but at the same time, that's time we could be spending elsewhere on making sure that the combat feels right, that the inner and outer loop feel correct. We didn't want to go super gory or gross, because it's just kind of like, yeah, cool, we could do that, but it's not really our thing. Like, it's not that we don't like that stuff. I love Mortal Kombat. But it's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, yeah, we don't really want to alienate a bunch of people from playing this game. Like, anyone can be an awesome sword god, so let's make something that is our own and feels and looks cool, and I don't know, at least kind of stands out. And so, like, the whole neon aesthetic that we're going for, this weird crossing of the streams with fantasy and almost this 80s synth thing, kind of worked out with and made it feel unique, and kind of made it, I guess, I know for me, I wanted to make sure that you felt like you had permission to kill these monsters. Like, these are monsters. These are not things that it's like, oh, can I reason with this thing? Can I talk to it and become friends with it? No, these things are here to kill you. And this is a game about hitting things with swords, so hit things that you feel justified in hitting with swords. And if we leaned too far in, like, any direction where we, like, got way too into the gore, or, I don't know, made them scream in pain, or, like, ask you not to do it, like, that just wouldn't have felt good, at least to me.
I think it had a lot to do with what our focus was on. Like, I really like games like Blade and Sorcery. I think is a lot of fun.
Or even like Gorn.
Yeah, or even Gorn is a lot of fun. It's about the sandbox of look at all of the things that you can do to defeat these characters that are coming at you, and our goals way up in the front of the project were about the fight, not about winning the fight. So we have ragdolling and everything. We try to make it satisfying, like you can send characters flying. And we do have characters that don't show blood or gore, so like theoretically they can be dismembered and everything, but that's a pretty big, like there's a lot of tech that goes into that and making that moment feel right.
Yeah.
And we just chose to spend that time instead on making our hits feel right, making combat into something that feels challenging, and really into speeding up the combat and seeing if we can get combat in this game moving at a pace that's comparable to a non-VR game. So hopefully if you're playing this game, especially like at a high tier, like deep in, the empowered versions of these enemies are moving very fast, like as fast as they would in a non-VR game. And you're expected to keep up, which is why everybody gets sweaty by tier 2.
Yeah, and the enemies move differently than each other. They seem intelligent. They're constantly trying to find your openings, and they act differently, which I think like is something that I haven't really experienced before. They're not just like stacking up, walking slowly towards me and flailing their arms. Like they're doing scary things, and I can't always predict what the scary thing they're going to do is. So it really feels like it's always tense. You're always on edge. You're always that fight or flight, and we fight a lot. So.
Yeah, I think for us, just making sure that like the magic feels awesome, that the hits feel awesome, that scoring like a critical hit really is communicated and is something you want to do and feels nice and juicy whenever you hit them with the sword. And in normal combat, like enemies are coming in so quickly, and the pace of the combat is so fast, like you don't have time to notice what's happened once you cut one enemy down because you're already turning to the next one.
I feel like I don't know if this was a decision that you guys that factored into your decision, but VR too. Like for me, I can't look at like blood. If someone was cut open in front of me, I would pass out.
Sure.
So in VR, like if there was a bunch of blood and gore on the screen, I probably wouldn't want to play this game because I might pass out in the head.
Yeah.
What happened to Joey? There was blood.
Oh no. I mean,
yeah. So I don't think. Yeah. That was just to say that the lack of gore and dismemberment and stuff, it certainly isn't a bad thing. I don't feel like it's a restriction that our game doesn't have it. I think it really almost adds to the sort of the magical nature of this world where, like, this isn't Earth. This is, we all know what it is. It's unknown.
Yeah.
And you're really stepping into a whole different world here.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that sense of presence and honestly that invasion of presence. Like, enemies coming at you is one thing, and then, like, you running a sword through a guy, if it's really realistic, like, it's like, oh, what have I just done? This is like, that poor guy. Yeah, no, it's really funny, the whole passing out thing.
If I came here and I was assigned to it and there was blood, we don't know what happened.
No, to Patrick's point of whenever, because it's melee combat, so I know whenever I'm in there, you don't really get the chance to just watch it as you just like, yes, I did that to that guy. You finish, and then like you're getting hit by somebody coming next to you, so you have to immediately just start fighting. So I think you're right. Like it's the satisfaction of like the actual combat versus like you're vanquishing the enemy and you're just towering over the body.
Yeah, and like we do have it again. Patrick pointed out that we have the ragdoll, and so there is
Right.
like the final line of the mirror. Yeah, there's a little bit of like a boom, you hit him over the fences,
Right.
And so you can do some pretty fun stuff
Yeah.
with that. But again, it's not like gross out,
Yeah.
kind of
Right.
like over the top.
Yes.
You see him kind of like wisp away, and
Yeah.
it's kind of cool.
It's very
Yeah.
very tasteful.
Yes.
Yes.
Classic VR.
Tasteful obliteration.
Yeah.
Tasteful yes. I like it. Are the enemies, this is from Discord, are the enemies modular or just one chunk of HP? If we need him to go into further explanation of what they mean.
I think I get you. So
Okay.
the question is, if I'm reading this correctly, and
Yeah.
Discord can correct me if I'm not. do the enemies have 1 HP bar, or is there positional damage or locational damage? Like, can you knock out an enemy's armor leg? For us, the enemies actually are 2 chunks of HP, but we are abstracted out. So we, again, like Blade and Sorcery, I know has done a lot to emphasize locational damage and living ragdolls, and I think that is a very fun kind of game and a fun kind of gameplay. And it's just not what our focus is. So our focus is about the squaring off and the pace of combat against a small number of enemies at once. So you are managing, I'd say that when you're fighting in Until You Fall, you're caring about things on a higher level. So you're trying to stun an enemy, push them back away from you. We use a system of guard that controls whether or not you're actually dealing HP damage to them. That really makes it the best way to play is to focus an opponent down, break their guard, get in some damage, they'll stagger away and recover, and their enemies will come in, or their friends will come in and cover for them, and you need to manage that aggro. And a lot of your magic that is in the game is actually around trying to manage that aggro for multiple enemies. So there are ways that you can disable enemies in the game, but it's not based off of what part of the body you're hitting right now.
Yeah. It is about, like, through attacking and blocking, through, like, kind of defending yourself. Like, you will wear the enemy down by defending yourself and lashing out at them, and then eventually they expose their juicy health gems that you can then start whittling away. TM. Do not steal.
And the advantage of, that's a high level decision that we made pretty early on, because it is such a huge challenge in VR, in any game where you're trying to go for like an analog combat system against AI, to make your AI smart enough to really be able to handle things like ankle biting, like just slashing. And we, I think, walked away from some early prototypes because of that, and because, like, making sure that the most awesome, most cinematic way to fight these enemies are also the most efficient way.
Yeah.
So that you will be doing the cool thing when you're also trying to play to win as hard as you can, is why we walked away from some of those more simulation-based aspects and went for the fantasy.
Yeah, playing cool should not be playing suboptimally. Like, you should not feel like you're like, yeah, I could do the thing that they want me to do, but I found this thing where if I just do this, I will win the game. And so, like, reinforcing that fantasy is just super important.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest differences, really, when we're talking about Until You Fall versus some of the other Melee games out there. We really don't want to be a game where you have to play pretend with the game to have a challenging experience. We want you to try whatever you can do as hard as you can to win. And if we're doing our jobs right, that will also be something that feels like sword fighting, that looks like an over-the-top representation of sword fighting.
Yeah, it's what you'd imagine sword fighting being like, I guess.
If you had superpowers.
if you were a glowy knight thing.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that is something that you can come back to and really try to play on like harder difficulties with different weapons.
Yeah, it's also about kind of finding like your kind of identity as a fighter. Yeah. It's like, do I want to be the guy with the double daggers? Do I want to be like kind of fast, kind of cause death by 1,000 cuts? Do I want the big battle axe? Mm-hmm. Do I want to just focus on magic? Mm-hmm. Like, what's neat is that because you have the 2 weapons, you are mixing and matching both the supers and just the weapons themselves. So it's like, yeah, okay, we don't have hard classes in this game. You don't select warrior from a drop-down menu. It's like, no, I will be a warrior. I will be what I think is a warrior, because that looks like a cool axe and that looks like a cool sword. I am now the warrior, and it's really just about experimenting and trying that.
There's a question about that. So about how different is each fight? So you kind of went into, like, there isn't one type of class that somebody can fit in, but how many different enemy types are there? Like, is there, let's see, what were some of their examples? Yeah, big guys, shield guys, archers, etc.
I'd say, not counting bosses, we have four, maybe 4.5 basic types.
Yeah.
And then each of those has a less powerful version and a more powerful version. And our goal with them, because it is expensive to create an enemy for VR that can really handle all of the things that you can do in VR, even without positional damage. They really have to maneuver like they're intelligent and working together. We wanted to design enemies that can give you a lot of different encounters whenever you cross them with different arenas and just the enemy composition. So there's, we do have one that is focused around ranged combat, playing evasively. We do have a tank, that's the captain with the shield, that forces you to dodge a lot of attacks and has a lot of armor up front. We have the knights are like they're the closest to you as an archetype, so they have the fastest attacks and they attack the most often. And then we have our basic husks that we can use to sort of fill out arenas. And we've found that, if we just put a couple of our spell swords, our ranged enemies in a room, you can fight them, and it's pretty interesting. You can focus down a spell sword and then chase after the other one. The second we put 3 spell swords in a room, or protect those spell swords with a couple of captains, it completely changes the fight, because now you've got to figure out a way to get around the shield guys to get to the ranged attackers. And if we did that in hallway, then Chase was being really mean.
I've been mean a lot.
There's a lot of hallways. Dudes in the back.
Good stuff.
And then again, if you're depending on the weapons that you've taken with you, like you're going to be dealing with that in a very different way. Like if you're playing as a mage, if you're trying to play as a spell sword and power up ranged attacks and throw them back, you're going to be playing very differently than if you took the axe.
Yeah. And and I guess the other important thing too is that we wanted a nice variety of weapons, but we also didn't want there to be a wrong choice.
Sure.
So it's not like rock, paper, scissors or something like that, where it's like, yep, you took the fire axe and you're fighting a fire guy, so you can't do damage. Sorry, better luck next time. There are weapons that can work better against certain enemies, but it's really kind of up to the player to kind of like figure out how they want to use these weapons in these different situations. But there's no wrong choice necessarily.
Cool.
I mean, I think that even just the people in this room, we all have a different pair of weapons that we're probably comboing and playing most often.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Let's see. Pixel Mafia. I like that.
I owe them money.
That's right. We're going to answer your question, I swear.
They're coming to get you.
They're like, oh yeah, Dave, where will you be after this? It says, will there be multiple sword types? If so, what type of variants will there be in the weapon types? Or will there be different stances per weapon?
So, I mean, we tried to get a nice swath of different types of melee weapons. We got a mace. We got different lengths and weights of swords. We have axes. I think, the swords of daggers. How can I forget the daggers? We have non-weapon objects that we're experimenting with, where it's like, yeah, no, you can't. You can kind of paw at a guy with it, but it's really about this is a magical focus, so it lets you cast spells more. So each of those, kind of as Patrick was alluding to, like they have different weights, they have different feels.
Yeah, with swords particularly, we've got your starting weapon is an arming sword. We've kind of designed that to be a nice all-around defensive weapon. It's the same weapon that the knights use. We have a single-edged blade that has got a more magical focus, and we have a lighter end sword that's a saber that's got it requires a little bit more finesse, so you unlock it later in the game, and a heavier sword that gets up to be about a hand-and-a-half sword, I'd say, and that focuses on a more tactical play style. It's like your arming sword, the super ability for it is a shield that you can activate once it's fully charged. It gives you temporary armor, and while it's active, your blocks actually deal additional damage. The curved sword, the High Arcanist's blade, is actually one of our spell-focused weapons. So it's all about getting killing blows with the sword to charge Shardstorm, which is one of the most powerful supers. It's a big slow-moving cloud of
Pain.
pain. Sort of, yeah, sort of, if you like to try and control the area, you can lure as many enemies as you can into one area and then sort of like mow them all down at once and open them all up at once for a crit. The saber is all about, I would say, poise and control. It's
A graceful weapon.
I'm going to say it's a sassy weapon.
Sassy.
It gives you increased. It gives you increased dashes. Its super is stasis strike, which lets you hit an enemy to freeze them in space, and its keystone trait actually gives you bonus damage for being at full health. So you want to try and play perfectly with
Right,
it.
you want a perfect block.
To really get an edge with it.
Show off constantly.
And then the heavy longsword, Mist Cutter, is actually my favorite weapon. And it's all about, it's got one of the weirder play styles. So its super actually lays down a series of traps on the ground. And there are other weapons that can lay down traps, but Mist Cutter sort of capitalizes on it in a unique and fun way that any enemy that you get caught in one of the stasis traps then will take extra damage directly to their health through their armor if you break them out of it. So since Mist Cutter is a heavier sword, it's a little bit harder to block with, it's a little bit bigger, does more damage, but it rewards you for kind of setting up the playing field in advance. So luring enemies into an open area, laying down your traps, and then getting them to jump into them, and then breaking them to deal a lot of health damage up front.
Yeah, and you're kind of alluding to it, kind of with regards to stances and like the way that you kind of hold your weapons and kind of use the weapons, because the weapons are different size, different weight. We don't ask you to have to like stand like this to use the weapons, but the way that the weapons feel and the way that we ask you kind of to defend yourself and attack the enemies, they kind of encourage you to kind of follow through in certain ways. A big thing that we try to encourage in the game is that wider swings in the game will deal more damage, and not only does it deal more damage, but it also just feels cooler. Like you feel like you're actually following through the weapon and feel like hitting the dude.
Yeah, I would say we definitely have stances, but they're emergent. They're
Yeah.
things that we've
That's
actually
kinda how-
discovered
yeah.
as we've played, because like Dave said, we have our own heuristics for how much damage swing deals. It is based off of how big the swing is, so you really want to bring it off to the side to do maximum damage with your weapon, but that's also very far away from where the blocks are.
Yeah.
So we have people that play very defensively and definitely keep their weapons in the middle of their screen, but then you're not really in a position to do big attacks quickly. We've got people that play very wide, that are sort of counting on being able to dash into an enemy and break them before the enemy can counterattack, but they'll get in a lot of damage. And there are some nice procedural things like thrusting strikes we never explicitly planned for, but we discovered it and it was awesome. Like, because of the way big swings work, if you line up for a thrust and then dash into an enemy from far away, you'll get the damage from the dash and the damage from a big swing, because you're
Traveling.
impaling somebody
It's-
from 20 feet away.
You're riding an invisible horse, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
I actually think one of the coolest things about is using the non-ish combat weapons, right? The
Sure,
like
yeah.
the amulet forces you're forced to play with one hand. So it kind of changes, it inherently changes your stance, right? Because
Yeah.
all of the things you could do with two when you're trying to block and parry and swing, you can only do with one, right?
Yeah.
So now you're doing things like you're blocking like this, because
Right,
you needed
yeah,
to
yeah.
come like this. You need
Yeah.
to change your shoulder. You kind of need to change the way your shoulders are positioned, and then you need to be able to counterattack. So it really changes the way that you present yourself and the way that you swing. So the weapons really do change your stance, depending on how it feels for you. I think it
Yeah.
really is about the person.
Yeah.
But the weapons do have some implication on how you move.
Yeah, like I would just want to emphasize that like it's not like we're forcing people to hold it a certain way. It's like it's this kind of natural stance that makes you feel awesome. I mean, like the big swings, it doesn't feel like I'm just making a big swing because the game designers told me to. It feels like I'm making a big swing because I really want to mow down this enemy, and it just makes you feel awesome as you're doing it.
the weapons just feel different.
Yeah.
Like just swinging a dagger versus a sword feels different. And so inherently, if I swap those two in my hand, I'm going to swing differently, I'm going to stand differently, I'm going to fight differently.
Yeah, there's also the offhanded versus main-handed. Right?
Mhm.
There's the,
Right.
Are you a lefty or are you a righty?
Right.
Like, which weapon do you put in which hand? You know,
Mhm.
like which weapon do you do the finishing blows with? Which weapon do you do health damage with? Like that
Yeah.
drastically changes the order, and,
Sure.
and that will potentially changes the way you stand, the way you hold those weapons. And you may fight with your axe just like this all the time, ready because to capitalize on a big swing. Right?
Right.
You could do that, and then you could fight with a defensive dagger like this,
Mhm.
and then so it really does change depending on the idea you have.
Mhm.
Depending on a run that you may have failed, you know what I mean? Like, wait a minute, let me just try this, you know?
Yeah.
So it really does change. It's really up to you to kind of experiment, and we leave it open for you to do that. Like, just try it.
Cool. Greg V is asking, from the studio, Greg V. Yeah.
Great feat.
Hey, Greg.
Hi, Greg. Will you have any gun blades?
No.
Next question.
I like gun blades, but no.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Let's see.
Sorry, Greg.
It's all good. From Discord, how crazy can your synergy perks get? Can you achieve something godlike?
Yes.
Yes.
I think you can speak to some of the more exciting
Weird
combos.
combos, yeah.
Yeah, so we have a number of big status effects in the game. Like I would say the two main ones are Soul Burn, which is like a damage over time effect, and Stasis, which disables an enemy in time. And you can get other abilities that capitalize off of that, and a number of the supers also trigger that. And since the supers can also be upgraded during a run, they will get new powers, new sub-effects. Some of them gain the ability to actually apply Soul Burn or apply Stasis on a super use. You can cross that with the abilities that will key off of or give you extra damage or extra effects if you hit an enemy that's already been afflicted by a status effect. Those are some of the ones that we saw appear early on. There are definitely ones that we didn't plan for that just revolve around getting like absurdly high combo limits if you really can get in a lot of combos quickly. I know that we've got some fun interaction with things that give you damage bonuses if you are hitting an enemy that is afflicted by a trait or afflicted by a status at the same time you are getting deeper in a combo chain. Like Lethal Elegance is one of the more powerful traits right now that actually gives you bonus damage for successive combos. And if you're doing successive combos on an enemy that has Soul Burn applied to it, and your other weapon has a Soul Burn application super or a Soul Burn application trait on it.
Yeah.
You stack damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, there's some really fun ones that have to do with supercharge, with magic charge as you build up. So there's things that will multiply how quickly your weapons build up power.
Wow.
And if you can kind of stack those, and once you stack them, you're just throwing magic like crazy.
Yeah.
Now I know there's obviously some balance there, to be done, but there's a moment where you're like, did that charge again? Really?
Aha!
What? And you're kind of looking at your sword like, really? Did I? What? And you're just like, ching,
Have some.
ching.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of going crazy. Yeah. So those so powerful it catches you off guard.
Yeah, no, it's the thing I love about the traits are the fact that you feel like you've outsmarted us, which you may have, but it's the kind of thing where you just feel like you got one up on the game, where it's like, oh, there's no way they meant for this combo to exist. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't.
Yeah.
Either way, it's the kind of thing where you feel incredibly powerful and you feel incredibly smart for fighting these things.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And yeah, no, you can. Kind of going back to an earlier question you asked about the alpha, the thing I'm excited about as more and more people play test the game is just like, yeah, what are the combos we didn't plan for? that are real cool.
Yeah, that you
do
found,
we
yeah.
do we continue to support those, or do we have to bring those in a little bit?
I was like, oh, you're a little bit too powerful.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just excited just to have more people play this in the wild.
Excellent. And speaking of, somebody asks, yeah, when can we play it? Or when can we get more gameplay and features? Soon!
Thank you. Took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, so you guys can talk a little bit more about the closed alpha, but we are looking at opening another community group to play the game, to help show some of the gameplay, some of the features in it. We'll be announcing when we'll be doing that in the near future, so that's exciting. And then for the closed alpha, I know you guys are just steadily growing it as the game grows.
Yeah, because we're still actively working on the game, we want to make sure that we don't accidentally burn ourselves out by just like, oh god, now that we're also building the game, but we also need to worry about making sure that people can play this thing and actually have fun playing it. And so we're really just trying to take our time and like kind of stumble quickly, basically, to like kind of get through this process and make sure that we can grow it over time. Because the hope is that we got through some early stumbling blocks. It's great. We've already learned a lot, and now we'll be able to start opening it up more and more.
Right.
We also know that like first impressions matter.
Oh, totally.
So like one of the things we already ran into with our alpha build was one of the settings was on by default that wasn't supposed to be on by default.
Mm-hmm.
And so like we don't want everyone to get stuck with something that isn't supposed to be there, right? So.
Exactly. And so it's thank you already to our early alpha testers. You were wonderful. And so you are paving the way for the ones that come into the future. So yeah, no, we will add more people soon.
And then there was a question too while we're on the subject. Serpsa was asking, when is beta? Beta will come after alpha.
That's a great answer, Dwayne.
That's my second dad joke. So I only got one more. Oh no!
Oh, yeah.
Oh no! Strike two. Okay. Oh man.
Tisk tisk.
I know. Just burning right through it. Oh man. All right. Let's see. Pixel Mafia asks, will there be different armor types in the game that affect move speed and stamina, if stamina exists? Or will all players have the same armor type? This was from, Pixel Mafia is on YouTube.
You are in the same suit of armor. A lot of the stat changes that change, like, not necessarily move speed, but like how often you can dash, how frequently, or how much damage you do, all that stuff is based off the weapons. It's something we would love to explore at some point, potentially, but right now it's really just about the weapons.
Yeah, right now your class is dictated by which weapons you've chosen. And they do affect your starting health and, like Dave said, the number of dashes you have, and actually the amount of damage that a dash does is also sort of how heavy your character is, like how heavy the weapons are. And then the other axis of that is that you can find stat upgrades in the run and actually in the level that will last just for that level, that will let you further progress. So you can sort of start off high on health and then maybe actually spend that health to turn it into damage. So we've got some rewards that'll give you a lot of damage to a weapon but then take away one of your health crystals and things like that.
Yeah.
So your class is constantly changing depending on your decisions during the run, I'd say.
Right.
Good deal. Let's see. So I am Elliot Richardson on Twitter asks,
What's up, Elliot?
are you done with your motion captures? I guess they're talking about, we posted a video of Joey Z doing some capture work for our trailer. So they want to know, are we done with that?
I think that the last shots for that are wrapping up right now. They don't have their star actor with
Yeah,
them.
I mean, they're like really, you'll notice the difference.
You'll know what shots that I'm in.
Clearly.
The ones that look really cool.
Yeah, the good. If you see the good ones, that's him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think those are wrapping up now.
Yep.
So.
Cool. So, there's your answer. Let's see. How many people initially worked on the project, and how long did it take to pull the prototype off? So I guess, yeah, how many people were initially on the project, and how long did it take to get to where we are now?
Boy, I joined fairly late in the grand scheme of things. I think, Pat, it started in what, January of 2018? Or was it even earlier than that?
Well, I would say, yeah, we started throwing the idea around in December of 2017.
Okay.
January of 2018 is when we really got started. The first prototyping team was small, I would say 6 or 7 people about.
Yeah.
Just to get the prototype online. A lot of that early on was at the same time exploring, hey, what does the combat look like in VR? How can we do that with movement? And then on the design side, you know, what kind of game do we want to build? Because we wanted to wrap the combat with a progression and a reason to keep coming back. And I would say probably by July,
Yeah.
The end of July, we were finishing pre-production. We had a good idea of how the movement was going to work, how we were going to hit enemies and deal damage well, and that's really when we started staffing up. And when Dave joined us to go into production,
Yeah.
it was a fun ride.
It was something. No, it was pretty wild because like pretty much we jumped in. We was like, yes, we have a cool combat. It feels good to hit dudes with swords. And then I was like, okay, but then what is the greater context of doing this? Why are you doing this? You both, you know, for war reasons and just like, you know, getting into the spirit of the game and feeling like you have reason to do it, but also just like, what is the mechanical mid loop? What is the mechanical outer loop? Like, am I doing it to earn new weapons? Am I doing it just for the story? Like, finding those things and like one of the early goals for the game is like making it replayable and making it have enough content to feel worthwhile, which is why we kind of ended up at the roguelite structure of like, yeah, it's a run-based game where you're still making progress. Like you are running on that sweet treadmill, chasing that carrot of the next cool sword, and yeah, I think from that point when we started staffing up, like I think at its peak we were like 20, 30 people. Like we had kind of parts of people, like we had a lot of people kind of coming in and out, like different, we like, you know, parts of animators, parts of sound people, that kind of thing, where like we're trading lots of horses, where yeah, at its peak it was like 30 people, like you'll see them all in the credits, but it got pretty crazy. It's definitely one of the bigger projects that I've ever had to be a part of.
Cool. Let's see, Ryan B. Hey Ryan. Ryan's one of our active Discord members as well, so thank you for
What's up, Ryan?
for asking this question. How did you approach gamifying the experience instead of the kind of physics sandboxes like in other sword combat games?
Yeah, I mean, I think Patrick talked about this a little bit earlier,
Mhm.
but it is
Yeah.
just like it is achieving the fantasy of being awesome at swords.
Yep.
It's like that sounds stupid, but it's really like kind of for Ryan Trail, I like the phrase misremembered nostalgia, where it's like, oh, that's what I thought it was like when I played these games,
Yeah.
and so we'll deliver on that misremembered memory
Yeah.
of how cool it was.
Yeah.
And so for this, it was kind of like, hey, we're deluding you into, you're kind of being, not tricked, but we're helping you get into the fantasy of what you think swinging swords around is like. And so a lot of that was kind of the driving force of like, oh, okay, let's try to simplify the combat to a point where we can achieve that.
Yeah, actually, early on in prototyping, we had a lot of sandboxing mechanics. Like we played around with living ragdolls. We spent a lot of time on weapon pinning.
Yep.
That was back when we
Sorry,
could
Henry.
count the sword.
I remember back when you could do things like poke enemies in the leg. You know,
Oh, yeah.
It was like
Um,
it was really early, but
And some of those were hard cuts for us because
Yeah.
the sandbox aspect is fun, but what ended up being the sort of line that we would cut things on is, does that make the best way to play the game something that isn't fun or isn't cool
Yeah.
at the end of the day? And like for weapon pinning is a good example of in the moment, it's really a neat idea to stick your sword into somebody and then see that it gets stuck there. That's actually a bad thing to have happen in combat.
No, wait!
You need that for the
Don't you
next
run away
level.
from me!
And so we found that we were spending a lot of time just trying to figure out how to get some of the more living dynamic aspects to work and play nice with the game mechanics. And we did some tests where we quietly turned them off. And then when we brought in playtesters, we would see if anybody would notice or miss that. And if we could turn it off and nobody noticed that, hey, you actually can't get your weapon stuck in enemies anymore, then that was a good indication that, like, that's a cool feature, but not as important to this game, because this game is about the rhythm and the flow and the speed and the momentum of combat at a high level.
Cool. Let's see. Will the game get Valve Index finger tracking support for things like casting spells? Well, right now we are focusing on getting the game perfect, or at least right, on Oculus.
Not perfect.
on the Rift and the Vive. So we will. If the plan is to look at other platforms that might make sense, but that's down the road. We're looking at getting the game right on the Rift and the Vive.
Yeah, no, we want to make sure, like, we've looked at, there's the Rift S, there's the Knuckles, there are
Right.
other platforms that we would love to look into, but we're trying to make sure that we get it right for these two platforms.
Cool. So there's that. Let's see. So get your last questions in. We're going to be wrapping up in just a couple minutes. So if you have a question that you're just sitting on, thinking we're going to get to it, just ask it.
This will be your last chance.
Last chance. Last chance ever. Ever. Or look into the corner. Right? Ever?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I don't know. Let's see. So let's switch gears a little bit while we wait for those final questions to come in. What VR games do you like and play yourselves right now?
Recently.
I'm still trying to get through Lone Echo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really enjoy that game. I like taking it slow. I don't get to play VR very often, as much as I like. But that game is just so. I just like float around in the space station. It's just so immersive. Like, and I like being just really feeling like I'm there and floating around. So that is a game I really enjoy. Yeah, Lone Echo.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most recent one I've been playing is probably Beat Saber, just because there's the relevance. It's the kind of thing where you just drop in, you again enter that flow state, you just feel good. It just feels good to swing those things and just get into it. I don't know. It's hard not to enjoy that game.
Well, sadly, I don't have my VR headset in Pittsburgh, so I don't get to play much VR at home these days. But one of my favorite VR games is Cosmic Trip. It's kind of a tower defense kind of thing. I also recently put together the Lavo VR. Putting it together was a little bit more fun than the games inside compared to compared to what we're working on. But it was still fun. It was a nice VR experience.
Cool.
I still go back to Blade and Sorcery. I really like the updates they've been doing on the simulation side of things, since again a lot of our prototypes started there, and it's fun to sort of peek over and see what they've been working on since then. All of those little fiddly features that we had to walk away from for scope or just for pacing reasons. It's fun to just hop in and play. And then in terms of non-VR, but just sword related, sword adjacent. Mordhau has been a lot of fun. And
What is it?
Mordhau
Okay.
is not VR, but another game that is really trying to tackle the hard problem of getting melee combat in a video game in general that has depth and a good pace to it.
How does it not just feel like you were just clicking the button to do this over and over again? How do you like directionality, blocking, timing? It's wild. That game is both real of like, I don't know, it's both really deep but really goofy at times. I love it. It's really good.
My fallback's always super hot.
I was just gonna say
Yeah.
super hot too.
Man,
Yeah.
the time mechanic's awesome, and just throwing objects in the game feels
Yeah.
really satisfying.
It's a great last resort. You're like,
Yeah.
I did it!
Yeah. Yeah, no, super hot. Yeah,
Super hot's
is
classic.
mine. I like super hot a lot. Cool. Let's see. What do we got? We got Alexander. So publishing games on different platforms. Have you encountered any optimization challenges?
Yes.
Wait, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes.
No, making sure that we're trying to make sure that we can run the game on minimum spec hardware for both the Oculus and the Vive, and making sure that we can still make something that looks cool and glowy and neon, while also running at frame rate is a challenge. It's really about like how do you have to be smart about what you're drawing when you're drawing it.
Yep.
In our game with so many cool effects and like even just like the UI that shows your basic information, like all of that has cost, and so it's really about basically triaging what is important and
Yeah.
where do you spend the effort that you have to draw the stuff.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're making choices the entire development to mitigate those issues, right? You're making decisions that up front stylistically. Like I know for me, for sure, I had to make stylistic decisions of how in depth the VFX we're going to get, right? Both for how we can run, if it can run, or if it's going to be too much, in your face, and then you just constantly make that decision as you go. You're constantly going, oh, no, too much, no, too much, too much, pull that out, put that back in, so, and you have to constantly do that. The more restrictive the platform, the more hardcore those decisions have to be. So if you're doing something for Quest, if you're doing something for Cardboard or something like that, it completely changes
Oh, yeah.
your decision makings, it changes your style. And we've done some projects on those platforms. So, yeah.
And the team does a lot to make sure that, like, we do get to achieve this neon look, but still run on the minimum hardware. Like, I know a big effort right now is making sure that our UI is nice and optimized while still looking as awesome as it was designed to be. So, yeah, everyone really works hard to make sure that we're giving the best quality experience while still supporting as many people as we can.
Yeah.
Good deal. Well, we are no new questions, so we will wrap up. So if you haven't already, like we said before, you can join our Discord, discord.gg/until-you-fall. You can go to the Until You Fall website, untilyouFall.com, to sign up for a newsletter. Check out the gallery. It has some concept art, some screenshots. If you have we didn't even get to this. For Game Informer, we're in the physical magazine for July, so pick that up and read about the cool things that the Game Informer reporter had.
Buy 10 copies.
Yeah, that's right.
Buy
Nay, 15.
Buy them for your dog.
Because dogs enjoy swords.
Yeah.
So, maybe. Yeah, probably. Yeah. So you'll read about our CEO Jesse Schell talking about VR and sword fighting and why he thinks that's the future, and hopefully we're kicking it off with Until You Fall. So that's really cool as well. The digital copy of the article should be out fairly soon as well. For Schell Games, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. In terms of events, we have our advanced producer John Joy going out to Serious Games. So that if you want to see another Schell Games member talk about the cool stuff that they're doing, they'll be in Montreal July 10th through the 12th with there. So that's cool. And then, you can sign up for our newsletter as well on schellgames.com. Scroll all the way down, join the newsletter. So for that being said, we'll look forward to seeing you next month in July for our July edition for Dinner with the Devs, and that subject is coming soon. So, so thank you guys. Thank you Until You Fall team, and we will see you later.
See ya.
Do it with swords. I'm still waving.